What's up, hackers? Welcome to Saturday Hacker Day. My name is Taggart, and today we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do on our Homelab. We have a lot of work to do here in the news segment, actually. We're going to do a deep dive here, which is a pun that you'll catch later. But let's get started with This Week in Cyber. We'll start off with the easy news story of this week, which is yet another 0-day in Apple's Webkit. This one is being tracked as CVE 2022-22620. And honestly, not a whole lot to report about this other than that there is a 0-day in Apple devices. This affects everything: Macs, iPads, iPhones, iPod Touches probably, anything that uses the Safari browser, which uses the Webkit framework. Orbital, Angel, Lasso, good to see all of you. And so this was an emergency push from Apple to get your Apple devices updated. There is evidence that this 0-day, which apparently can lead to remote code execution, is being exploited in the wild. Yes, of course, Emotet is still going strong. They'll never go away. And I think one thing to note here just is that this is not the first, and it certainly won't be the last time we've seen a 0-day in WebKit create this kind of a panic. And I think it's worth mentioning that, yeah, WebKit is in fact a single point of failure for Apple devices because so many things use it. And I'll also mention that WebKit is in places that most people, this audience probably is more familiar with this, but most people won't know, which is that, of course, WebKit, what is it? WebKit is the engine essentially behind the Safari browser. And it's what handles the JavaScript engine, all sorts of things going on with WebKit. But here's the trick. Many apps that aren't websites, right? Apps that you download from the App Store are actually using WebKit under the hood. Here's why. In many cases, it is a lot cheaper to develop essentially a bundled web application and use JavaScript code to develop your mobile app than it is to write I was about to say Objective-C, Swift code for a proper iOS mobile application. Consequently, what you get in a lot of mobile apps that you're downloading from the App Store is essentially it's an iOS project, but really under the hood, what it's doing is it's launching an instance of a WebKit web browser and pointing itself at local HTML and JavaScript files, and that's the UI that you're actually seeing. Lots of apps are done this way. It's really affordable to do it because then you can do the Android app the same way. You could even do a web version if you wanted to without having to maintain separate code bases. What this means is that you've got WebKit being used not just in Safari, but in any application that follows that model. So kind of a gigantic point of failure for iOS devices. And of course, if you are responsible for Apple devices, either your own or in organizations, make sure that they're getting patched as soon as possible. The next story, this one is absolutely wild. The next two stories that we're going to do are crazy. And the one after this, we're going to do actually a bit of a deeper dive because I think it's warranted. But this one is about some research that just came in from SentinelOne about a decade-long campaign on the part of, I don't want to call them hacktivists. It sort of seems like they're pro-state cyber criminals, which may or may not be state affiliated, that were planting fake evidence in the devices of Indian activists, pro-human rights defenders, academics, and attorneys across India that were protesting against state activity. The campaign is being called Modified Elephant, and I'll put in the link to the SentinelOne write-up about this. The story is absolutely insane, and I will quote just a little bit of it from the SentinelOne write-up because I think it's worth describing the background here. So yeah, in September 2021, Sentinel Labs published research into the operations of a Turkish Nexus threat actor we called Egomaniac, drawing attention to their practice of planting incriminating evidence on the systems of journalists to justify arrests by the Turkish National Police. Long-standing racial and political tensions in India were inflamed in January 1st, 2018, when critics of the government clashed with pro-government supporters near Bhima Koregaon. I'm sure I mispronounced that. The event led The event led to subsequent protests, resulting in more violence and at least one death. So what we now know is that the pursuant cases in these protests that led to arrests and incarcerations included falsified evidence because of this modified elephant attack. An absolutely egregious, I think, use of these sorts of cyber capabilities. But it turns out that Modified Elephant has been doing this kind of thing for a long, long time. Spear phishing that follows this pattern. Hey, Theo, thank you so much for the raid. Evidence that follows this same sort of pattern has been found going all the way back to 2012 or 2013. So that's pretty amazing. And we're talking about Trojans, we're talking about keyloggers, but I think the thing that I want people to take away from this story is that it was pro-state hacktivism. Again, that's a weird term to use for this, but pro-state, incriminating evidence being planted on dissenters. That is a really scary prospect, certainly in India, but anywhere else. Which brings us to our third story, which we are going to do a bit of a deeper dive into. So according to not just a story in the Register, but actually reports from U.S. lawmakers, Senators Ron Wyden and Martin Heinrich. So Ron Wyden is a Democrat senator from Oregon, and Martin Heinrich is a Democratic senator from New Mexico. They sent a letter to the Director of National Intelligence in the United States, Avril Haines, and the CIA Director, William Burns, for more information regarding operations called Deep Dive 1 and Deep Dive 2. And there's a lot to follow inside of this. But essentially what we're talking about is some information, some data that was likely collected by the Central Intelligence Agency on U.S. persons. Here's the thing. If you're not super familiar with the intelligence community or how U.S. law works, the CIA cannot operate domestically. It is not allowed to collect intelligence or operate against U.S. persons domestically, or really against U.S. persons, because it's meant to be a foreign service. It's meant to be an apparatus to collect intelligence overseas and from other nation states. So there's meant to be a firewall between organizations like the FBI, which does operate domestically, of course, and the Central Intelligence Agency, and even between the CIA and the National Security Agency, which we know operates domestically, sometimes not in super legal ways. But we do know that there's supposed to be that sort of firewall. Now, let's take a look at what we're talking about here. I'm going to switch over to our live desktop for this because I think it's worth going deeper on this. So the first thing that we need to understand is what this executive order, which was from the Reagan era, actually involved. So let's go up to the top here. This is, luckily, the National Archives maintains all of the executive orders that have been signed at any time. So this was signed in December 4th, 1981. So yeah, this is a little bit historical. Oh, Cypher, thank you so much for the follow. Adverspace, thank you so much for the follow. Red Lips Synthol, thank you so much for the follow as well. And Cypher, good to see you, friend. So if we want to take a look at this executive order, what are we talking about here? Let's go down to the goals section first. The United States intelligence effort shall provide the President and National Security Council with the necessary information on which to base decisions, blah, 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 blah. This is a sharing opportunity. So basically what we're talking about is an information sharing order such that different components of the intelligence community in the United States can and should share information with each other in order to inform the National Security Council. Let's take a look, though, at the parts that refer to the CIA. So, in accordance with law and relevant procedures approved by the Attorney General, give the heads of the departments and agencies access to all intelligence developed by the CIA or the staff elements of the Director of Central Intelligence. That is kind of scary. What we're saying here is that all heads of departments and agencies, including NSA, including FBI, would have access to intelligence developed by the CIA. Now, how then are you going to be able to separate intelligence that was collected accidentally on US persons by the CIA from the stuff that CIA collected under their actual charter? In order to figure that out, we have that was really the question that Haynes and Burns were asking of Director Haynes, that the senators were asking of Haynes and Burns. In this super redacted letter, you can see here, we are writing to request an expedited declassification of the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board's Executive Order 12333, Deep Dive 2. And what they got back was two things. The first is this super long document, which I'm still reading through, which talks about recommendations pursuant to that executive order about how to handle this kind of intelligence. So if we go all the way up, right, this is a report on CIA financial data activities in support of ISIL-related counterterrorism efforts. The reason this matters, right, is that this executive order, even though it was signed back in 81, was still having an impact on information sharing procedures between the intelligence agencies in the United States up through the war on terror, right? ISIL refers to the Islamic State in the Levant, right? We're talking about Syria and that kind of, it's a pretty dated and colonialist term, the Levant, but whatever. That was the term because they didn't want to say ISIS, right? But if we skip down a little bit, Digital Warhead, thank you so much for the follow. If we skip down a little bit, on page 62, there is the section Use of USP, US Persons Information. So we're going to cut to that just real quickly to see what is supposed to happen, as opposed to what might actually be happening. I know that this is a deep dive, and I know it seems like really boring, but look, especially for those of you who are in the United States, this is the stuff that actually compromises your constitutional rights. It's the easy sign away. It's the easy memo in between executive agencies that seems okay at the time, especially in the support of counterterrorism operations or something like that. This is the kind of thing that led to Section 215 that allowed the NSA to wiretap all of us, right? So what we have here is, in use of USP information, US persons information, measures to protect US person information after it is acquired are particularly important if practice continues to rely on regular collection abroad. That includes an unknown amount of incidentally collected USP information. With regard to audits, the blank policy requires only maintenance of an auditable record of user activity for certain segregated databases to the extent practicable. As we go through this, the takeaway here is that there was no serious procedure for extracting US persons information accidentally collected by the CIA and preventing it from being handed over to other intelligence agencies. In fact, the recommendations after this is a much shorter bit. This is what the senators actually got back. Is that the CIA should draft implementations for guidance for the CIA's Attorney General guidelines. So basically, like, they didn't actually have a procedure in place. In fact, if we go back to the Register story where I'm pulling some of this from, there's a section here that basically says, that basically when you're doing this kind of review, there's like a pop-up that says, hey, don't use US persons information, but it doesn't actually really matter. Or it doesn't have any sort of hard firewall against collecting this information. Now, this would, on its own, be really nasty. But because we're talking about interagency sharing, maybe it's okay, because maybe the FBI, I'm going to try to say this with a straight face, maybe the FBI, maybe the NSA have procedures in place to protect US persons' information even after it's been accidentally shared by CIA. Here's the problem. In order to conduct these kinds of operations, especially for anything that is happening abroad, these agencies have to go to what's known as the FISA court. It's a court that was established pursuant to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978. That's where FISA comes from, in order to justify their intelligence collections. Problem is that the FISA court basically is a rubber stamp, and it turns out that the FBI has itself been a little bit lax in the way that it's been handling its FISA procedures. So in addition to the fact that FBI and NSA likely had access to inappropriately collected intelligence on US persons, so the CIA was breaking the rules, then if the FBI and NSA were also breaking the rules, what we have here is essentially the capacity for CIA to operate domestically in conjunction with other intelligence agencies outside of their charter, and frankly outside of what we could reasonably consider constitutional, and even outside of what the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act has established as appropriate. So I know that that was a lot. I know that was kind of like a bit of a tinfoil hat dive, but all of these documents, I think are worth taking a look at to see how the sausage actually gets made. So here come some links. Here is the link to the actual report on the CIA activities. Here is the link to this. This is the recommendations on how to do it better. And here is a link to the original register story. It's easy to downplay the severity of this, like, oh yeah, government spy. But the truth is that there are many avenues across which a free society can come under attack. Some of them are super obvious, like trying to subvert the results of an election, just as an example. But some of them are much more subtle, like using executive processes that don't necessarily see the light of day unless they're requested through procedures like this to subvert what we would expect in terms of due process and in terms of the rights established for us in our legislation and founding documents. I don't think it's a bad idea, especially if you are in information security, to be thinking about how information is being used and abused, not just by criminals, but by the nation states themselves, including, for us in the United States, the one that we live in. Right? A healthy democracy requires scrutiny of the state itself, and I do mean a healthy scrutiny, not necessarily conspiracy theory, paranoia. What we're looking at here are actual documents, and I want you to read into them. I want you to look at what the official publications are saying, but understand that there are ways in which these kinds of surveillance activities can get seriously out of hand. It's happened many, many times before, and I'm sure it won't be the last time. And it bothers me to a significant degree when the firewalls between intelligence collections agencies or intelligence agencies are broken. It's not just, I'm seeing a lot of comments about internet history in chat. It is not just about internet history. If you take a look at the way that CIA operates and the kinds of not just signals intelligence that they collect, but human intelligence that they collect, it's significant. You can imagine, listening in on phone calls using something like a triggerfish, right? Pulling data off of a cell tower. If it's done overseas, that's something that, CIA might have the capability to do. But then if that information is shared, how do we distinguish that from, the proper use of that kind of technology inside of the United States? Okay, against U.S. persons. All right, with all that out of the way, we're going to move into our actual material for today, which is continuing work on our Homelab. And so we have a lot of work on this to do today. And let's see how we're doing so far. So I'm still trying to use Packer for some of this, but we may not be able to pull that off. What I was hoping was I have my jump box here. And what I was encountering last time was that Packer was pulling an incorrect IP address from my Windows machine in order to fire up SSH. Now, this is still kind of taking forever. To set up actual machines using Cloud Init with Windows. But so we're gonna start with our Windows setup here. So let's actually talk about what our Windows setup looks like inside of Packer, and we'll kind of work through that. But then we can see what we might want to try to do to automate it further. I believe the Windows Packer build actually will work better than the Linux because it doesn't require the Cloud Init. I don't have to hit a web server from my Packer host in order to make it happen. So let's take a look at this is like the easy version, well, the naive version, I should say, of creating Windows assets with Packer. There's another way to do it, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. OreoBite asks, how come AV evasion is so rewarding when it works? I mean, I don't know. You're doing something that you're not supposed to, and it's your attempt succeeding. I think there are a lot of good reasons why that would be true. Digital Warhead says, I wonder about all the mass surveillance and data collection. How does so much horrible stuff still happen in the US that could have been prevented? It's like they're collecting this info, but still not really making us any safer. So I want to make a couple of points on that, Digital Warhead. So, like, here's the thing. We'll never know what was prevented. Like, obviously, I have a healthy scrutiny about the intelligence community, but I also have a lot of respect for what they do. Most of the people who work at NSA and CIA are people who actually are patriots, for lack of a better term, and they want to protect people in the United States. And you've got a lot of really, really skilled analysts who work for them who are looking at all this intelligence. Let's, put aside for the moment how it was collected. They're looking at all this intelligence, they're drawing conclusions, and we will never know what was prevented because of the intelligence collected. And that's a kind of a double-edged sword, because that's also what the intelligence community always throws in our face when we ask for more transparency. That's right, exactly, Cobra Style, right? IT is kind of thankless in a similar way, because users never see what didn't happen, right? They only see the stuff that goes wrong, but they never see what goes right because it's supposed to happen without anyone noticing. But yeah, so here in Packer, we do have a username and password, and if we look at, our config Packer, this is var.password. Actually, we need to fix this, I think, because even though it is var.password, I don't think it's set up here. And also, this should be proxmox ISO. That's how we're doing it. So the trick with this, also, I don't need this vbox manage because we're not doing virtualbox anymore. I'll change this to proxmox. Okay, so the way that this kind of works, I do need to fix this. Let's go to the Win workstation, because I think, there we go, username, password. Move that over to the Win Server block. And we'll also delete this VirtualBox plugin thing because I don't think we need that either. Yep. Yeah, we don't need that at all because we're not using the VirtualBox plugin. So here is the host name and then the password, which is, I have to make it a little bit different than the default that I was using for the Linux side because Windows has, you know, some hardcore rules about this. Now we're gonna fire this up, but here's the thing: the boot command, again, we have to worry about the timing for this to see if it's correct or not. So we might have to wait on this a little bit. I might kick this up actually to like 40 seconds just to make it a little bit easier. Now, this is the cheaty way of doing it because we're setting it all up this way using boot commands, and we're like keying through the install situation. And then we're even waiting for the reboot. This is like kind of a lame way to do it. You can see we're like doing PowerShell and stuff after it reboots. This is not super clean. And the way that I want to do it actually is using something else, which is called a Windows answer file. So if we look at what are answer files? So answer files are for unattended installations. And they kind of look like this, where they have XML data. And what you do is you mount these to a separate mounted drive for the device. And that allows you to sort of automate the configuration, very similar to how Cloud Init works for Linux, or for Ubuntu at least. You can also specify an unattended file to use by using the unattended option. So many users use the floppy files. So we can actually literally attach a floppy disk or something to this in order to mount the file. So we're going to try this because I like the idea of doing an auto unattend. So we're going to, in our config for, oh, sorry, I can close that. Let's go over to our jump box here. So in our Windows server, we're going to change this up a little bit, where we are going to make a new folder called scripts, and we'll make a new file called autounattend.xml. Now, what you're supposed to do is use the Windows system information. What is it? SIM, right? Windows SIM manager, like, yeah, the system image manager, to make these answer files. I don't have this, and I'm pretty sure that this is not a free tool. Maybe it is. No. Oh, yes it is. Okay. Windows Assessment Deployment Kit. How large is this? $1.5 gigs. No, don't collect insights. Deployment tools. All right. Okay, but while that's going, It's like, tell me you're a Linux system administrator without telling me you're a Linux system administrator. There's this really cool site I found called windowsafg.com, which allows you to create these answer files without using the system image manager. So we can actually set up some data here. I have no idea how the product key is going to work for the eval version. That'll be really interesting to see. But look, we can just set up like accept EULA, skip automatic reactivation, skip license rearm. That's fine. What is an answer file? Great question. So the answer file is this XML file that you can attach to a machine as it's getting provisioned as a Windows device that the Windows installer is going to look for, okay? And once it does, it'll say, oh, okay, this is where I'm going to pull the config from. I'm not going to walk you through the wizard. See, Windows will automatically look for auto-unattend.xml file on mounted drives. Many users use the floppy files option or a secondary mounted ISO for providing the answer file to their ISO builders. So we can actually try this with the floppy files, right? And we've got a Packer Windows repo is a great example of Windows builds set up WinRM as part of the unattended installation, so the Packer can connect using the WinRM communicator. We're going to try to emulate some of this here. Oh, awesome. Answer files. Look at that. Hey, Donut. What's up? So it looks like we're creating partitions here. Synchronous command. Ah, look at this. So we actually have commands that we can run. Flying too close to the sun with Rust. Yeah, well, you of all people would definitely be doing that. This is cool. Look at all these first logon commands. So we can actually set up first logon commands to have things happen on first logon. That is cool as hell. I love that. Now let's take a look at what we have going on so far. What are we using Packer for? We're using Packer to hopefully automate the building of templates for the Homelab server that we have going on. Here is the Homelab right now. It's still in early days. Yeah, this did not work. So here's Proxmox running. We've got the router. We've got the jump box, which I'm currently in, actually. This is the jump box. We've got the Ansible server up and running, and now we're trying to move into the Windows domain and the creation of that. So I want to try to do it as automated as I can. I'm going to kill this build, though, because this is not working out. Okay. So for Windows, what we need is this auto-unattend.xml. And what we'll do is we'll set up this right here. And I got to install the Prettify. Let's prettify JSON. Is there a prettify XML? Because, like, sucks. Prettier. That's what I wanted. It's only 312 oh no, 18.6 million installs. There we go. It's like 312 reviews. That's what I wanted. Okay. All right. I don't care about that. There we go. Much better. Okay. So I'm going to nuke the product key here because I'm hoping we don't need it. The organization, though, we do need. And then always be branding. That's right. Plain text true. Administrator password. Yeah. We'll try it this way. Okay. Then, in order to use this thing, we're going to actually comment out this boot command. And we shouldn't need boot wait either if we're not doing a boot command. So instead, if we look back at that Packer example, floppy files, and that's it. So floppy files, scripts, auto unattend. So this is in JSON, which I really wish they would start putting their examples in HCL because it's their own dang language. Cole Alt Elite, thank you so much for the sub. So let's see, floppy files equals. Is this going to work? Because it's an array here in the JSON example. So if we go back to doesn't have floppy files. That's upsetting. But I'm going to try it anyway. Yeah. This on your task list to do Packer to build AMIs. So I think that doing Packer to build AMIs is actually a way easier task. Yeah, we'll see how this goes. So we're gonna. What are we in? We're in the Win server. Okay. Let's see what happens. I'm assuming there's like a Packer test, right? Yeah, Packer validate. Ooh, interesting. There's a lot of errors here. Now, I don't need WinRM for this, actually. So I can knock this off. Quoted strings may not be split over multiple lines, but I'm not doing that? The hell? All right, whatever. I don't think Packer Validate is really helping me out here. Just go, see what happens. Wow, it really thinks... Am I missing a quote somewhere? Look at that. Oh, I am. Look at that. I'm missing a quote right there. Quantic, thank you so much for the follow. All right, one more time. Okay, so Packer Validate wasn't lying to us. Okay, line 2 in hostname, argument destination, so not commas. Oh, okay. What? No labels are expected for variable blocks. Variable? Oh, yeah, it's variable, not variables. God, this thing was a mess. Type string, a type specification is either primitive. Okay, I ran into this one before. A type specification is either a primitive. I think that I don't quote string in this. Is the trick. Sin is off topic, but set up a bunch of containerized honeypots through EC2. Found some malware that was undetected and wanted to run it and see what it does. Would I just have to transfer the files from the instance to a VM that's not connected to my network? If so, how can you see it calling out? You know who has a lot to say about that is Husky in his practical malware analysis and triage course. But I think what you're really talking about is if you have a disconnected VM, what you want to do is run inetsim or fakenet, and that will at least show you the attempted network requests without it actually phoning home. Argument named format is not expected here. Oh yeah, because all this stuff needs to guest additions mode. We don't need WinRM, use SSL. CPUs is good. Oh, it's called cores, right? In Proxmox. And oh, the ISO URL is going to be wrong too. We don't need to download it because if we take a look at the Ansible one that we did. There. Yeah, we need extra stuff. This is all our Proxmox stuff. Yes, I know that there's an API key in there. Yes, I know that it's visible. Right now, I don't care because, first of all, it's only on my local host. You're not going to be able to use this for anything. But okay. This is the same file because I moved it over. So that's good. And then we'll just move this SHA up here. Cool. And then I don't need the VirtualBox version file. I bet you I don't need the guest OS type either. And then, is it true that it's cores? Yes, cores and memory. And then we also need to do the network adapters. Right. And the disks. So we'll do all this. So we'll do bridge 1, bridge 2. Awesome. JM Reika, thank you so much for the follow. Okay. This is looking better. Give that a shot. See what happens over here. An argument named floppy files is not expected here. Well, that sucks. Let's do a quick Google of Proxmox auto unattend. Thank you, Hold My Beer Security. What you got for me? Okay. We got Vault for secrets. That's cool. Compose. Oh my. Okay, so it appears they're doing HDI util is on a Mac. Oh, there we go. I don't want to attend ISO. As you can see, this Packer file does not contain any secrets. ISO file. Specify. Right. So it looks like this Packer file does not contain any secrets. By specifying vault as the location of the secret, I don't care about that. During a typical, okay, here we go. During a typical Windows installation, the auto-unattend.xml will be provided by a floppy device. Hilarious. Proxmox does not support floppy devices, we just learned. This new Packer feature provides the ability to mount multiple ISOs for a Windows VM. Therefore, we have to convert the XML to an ISO. Oh, okay. I see. So we're going to make an ISO out of... Ah. Okay, so if we take a look, let's go back to our... How's this doing? Oh, this is done. So it seems like what we're going to do is we're going to use that command that we just saw, make IOFS, which makes sense. Wow, okay, that worked. So we have an auto-unattend.iso, and then the trick then, presumably, is to... So they have this ISO file for this. Path to the ISO file to boot from, expressed as a Proxmox data store path. So we're going to have to upload that ISO file. That's fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to rename that. Ronan, thank you so much for the follow. So we are... All right, we've got the... Oh, that was dumb. .iso. Cheers from Romania. You're very welcome. All right, so now that we've got this thing, let's go upload it to our Proxmox node. To do that, we go to data center. Nope, just kidding. There we go. We click on the node itself. We go to ISO images. We're building a Homelab, Ronan, and we're doing it using Packer and Proxmox. All right, so we're going to just upload. Win server. And upload. Okay, I guess that doesn't work. But that's fine. Win server. There's the ISO. Do the upload with Terraform? I'm not using Terraform yet. And let's give it the checksum just so we have it. Dope. Okay, so what we can do then is set up multiple ISO files. I would love to see how that works. You just literally do it twice. Okay. So then we do a new ISO file. Local ISO slash, and then win WS or win server auto unattend .iso, and then ISO checksum equals SHA-256, and that. Neat. Okay. I can live with that. Argument ISO file was already set. Each argument may only be set once. Except not, right? Because apparently with this, Packer docs on ISO file. Didn't actually help me at all. It just took me right back to where I was. So much molding with Packer. But I wanna figure out how to use it correctly. Path to the ISO file to boot from. Yeah, but this new Packer feature. This is what I was looking for. Additional ISO files? Is that what we do? Look at that. That could have been clearer. Additional ISO files. So I think the way that we would do that is, because it's an array, but it's in HCL, is something like additional ISO files. And see how we did like network adapters, which is also an array? You just define it multiple times. So I'm pretty sure I just do this. Additional. Yeah, that looks good. We just need to kill floppy files, which was down here. Huh. Awesome. Let's see if this works. Well, we're starting to build a VM. It picked up the Windows installer. I want to see that auto unattend.xml happen. Automated infra stuff is dope. Thank you, Donut. I appreciate it. I feel the love. I have Rust news for you if you didn't see. Husky and I successfully re-implemented like a screaming fast port scanner in Offensive Notion the other night. And it was a point of pride for me, just because like I've been trying for a long time to wrap my head around proper concurrency in Rust, and it was the first time where it like actually clicked. I am so sorry that I cannot read Hangul, but thank you so much. Welcome to our friend from Korea. All right, come on. Wait, what? Error converting VM to template could not stop, can't lock. Got timeout. What? That's interesting. Or before it dies, I want to know. Okay, it did mount our auto unattend ISO. It did do that. Yeah, this might be a thing, like maybe there was a phantom lock file from something else that I had done. Okay, this is apparently a thing. So QM unlock 100, because it was like, what was mine? QM unlock 103. So that's fine. Let's go to Starbase in the shell. And we're going to do QM unlock 103. The goal is to... Got timeout. And I gave the API key full privs. It should have everything. So that shouldn't be an issue. And interestingly, this thing still exists, which it absolutely shouldn't right at this point. Because it's not shutting down correctly. I have to blow it away. Yeah, you're right. It won't know how to shut down. Whoa, I can't do anything to it because I can't lock the file. That's interesting. Kill what process? I'm not killing Proxmox. Don't know, Cobra Style. I'm not seeing anything that has an ID associated with it in here. Yeah, removing the lock worked just fine, by the way. It does appear, though, as though now I can't remove this. But that's fine. If I start it again, what happens? So now, okay. And if I stop it, do I still have control over it? Yes. Don't seem to have the ability to remove it, though, which is something I really want to do. Oh, there it is. Remove. 103. Great, great. Interesting. Okay, so the issue was the lock. All right. Okay, so it's not cleaning up the locks. Interesting. So we're going to remove... We're going to do that again, because it's going to pull 103 again for the next ID, right? So we're going to do that again, and we're going to try that. That is a weird problem. Okay. Yep, so it rebuilds and it pulls 103 as the next ID, and it should generate a new lock file. It did. Why is it stopping the VM? What happened? Was there a command to shut it down that was somewhere in the queue? Yes, that's what we're trying to do. Automate VM management. But I'm honestly less concerned with... Now, if I hit Control-C here, what happens? Canceling build after receiving interrupt. But it isn't actually, right? And we say can't lock the file again. That's so interesting. Okay, so this is like a problem that we're running into. This appears to be something fairly common. Okay. If you run the shutdown command on an action and it fails. Okay. Okay. So that was part of the issue. So again, we couldn't lock the... So weird. All right, we removed the lock. This will stop it. And then we'll remove it. And we're just going to go ahead and not use that ID again, basically. Because that appears to be an issue. Oh, there's still a lock file. Yeah, but we're gonna, on the assumption that there's some other job with that VM ID, we can actually manually set the VM ID. Pretty sure? Yeah. So we're gonna manually set it to 104 because that's a weird problem. I wonder if that's supposed to be a string. Nope, integer. Okay, cool. Okay. If we can't get this going, we're just going to do it manually because I want the system up, and I want to do Ansible stuff more than I care about doing the Packer stuff. The Packer stuff, like, I want to get working, but honestly, it's more interesting to me have the lab up and running. You know what I mean? So once more into the breach. Stopping VM. Why is that happening? Oh, is it because there's no boot command? Oh, yeah. I bet you that's why. Because I don't have a boot command and I don't have... Okay. Okay. That's stupid. But I think that's a solvable problem. So basically, Packer doesn't know that we need to do something. Although... And the shutdown, right, is not working because the lock file isn't going to play ball. Right, there's the lock failure. Let's stop this task. Oh, whoa. That actually did kill it, though. Okay, so... Interesting. And there's the 104 lock. Interesting. Okay, so if the issue is that there's no... Yeah, that there's like almost like a race condition, I want to say. Basically, Packer doesn't know that it has to wait to do anything. Because it's like, okay, I spun it up, and then you didn't give me a boot wait, and then you didn't give me a boot command. So, like, whatever. So there are a few other things that we can do, though, with Packer to tell it to wait, right? Right. And then let's take a look at some of the Packer Windows stuff here, because we do have these examples that might be of use. Not answer files. Let's see. Scripts, templates, that's Vagrant. Floppy files. Okay. Fine. No Proxmox examples in here, unfortunately. Okay. At this point, I'm more interested in getting the server set up than I am actually dealing with Packer, so that's what we're gonna do. Create VM. ID 103, we'll see how this goes. Win server. Template. All right, the OS is, we're going to do local. The ISO image is going to be our server eval. Good. Type is not Linux, it's Windows. Yeah, it's version 10. System is fine. Disks. We want it to be a little bit bigger than that. Let's give it 80 gigs. CPU, definitely want at least 2 cores, and we definitely need at least 8 gigs here. Network. We're going to start it on VM Bridge 1 on SecLab because it needs an internet connection at first. And then we can move it over to our isolated network. Okay. Off you go. There's ID 103. And we need to actually start it in order to make this happen. There we go. Now, I have to say that setup process, honestly, I find it easier than VMware, the manual process. Apologies if you're a database, so I tried finding the info. What are you using the hardware for the Homelab? So Cole, it's there was like a journey with this, but yeah. So this is an HP ProLiant DL380p Gen 8, and let's go to the summary for Starbase here. We have ourselves dual Xeons giving us 20 cores, and we have 64 gigs of RAM. And our local storage is like 800 gigs on a RAID 1 with plenty of room to grow. Yeah, so I got it at a crazy discount from Save My Server. And it's the only way I was going to be able to do something like this. It was a refurbed machine. Okay, English, United States, good. Install now, fine. Tried to find the info. Oh, sorry. Doing this with a bunch of physical Intel NUC mini PCs, like 100 of them, Ansible. Yeah, so we're gonna use Ansible in the next part, right? I'm just trying to get Packer set up to work on the basic template, and then we do everything else with Ansible. But oh my god. So we're going to do it with the desktop. Standard evaluation with the desktop right here. Is the server super loud? That's a great question. On PowerUp, it is a jet engine, Sin. But once it's on and running, like it's not silent, but it's it's a noticeable purr. It's quieter than my air conditioner, and so I have it like in a different room for audio quality purposes. Oh, this is always tricky. You actually have to do the custom and then install. Can it be put in the closet? Not in this house, but otherwise, like, it's giant. Yeah, it's a rack-mounted 2U server, so it's enormous. But it's also the other thing is in this house, which was built like right after World War II, I have to be real careful about my power usage on each circuit. So, like, if I put it, I actually did put it on this breaker for a little bit to set it up and get everything going. But if I were like to have everything in this room running at the same time, I'd be very concerned about tripping a breaker, which I don't want to do in the middle of a stream. You have a full-size 42U rack in the middle of your room. That's a choice. I'm pretty sure that my wife would not be in favor of having a full 42U rack in the house. The machine is also on an uninterruptible power supply, which is good. So that's doing voltage smoothing as well as backup. I think it'll run for about 2 hours if we did the math right. If the power goes out or I trip the breaker for whatever reason. Boston apartments can be hit or miss. Yeah, oh man, East Coast. So, couple things. You've got a basement. Yeah, also heads up for flooding, because that's a thing now. You got a lot more rain coming in the spring and even in the hurricane season than you used to. Also, you know what's super fun, especially in Boston. I'm from Philly, so similar situations architecturally. Running cable through old buildings is just the best. Especially if you've got like interior brick walls or walls with like steel mesh in them. Oh, good lord. So good. Okay, so let's talk about... There better not be asbestos at this point. Horsehair plaster, though. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so while this is going, let's talk a little bit about what is going to happen on the Ansible side of things. In old buildings, there's all sorts of asbestos. Not quite. So I used to do asbestos remediation. So if there is asbestos, especially for like pipelining, they have to disclose it. But it's been like a decades-long process to actually remove pipe insulation that has asbestos in it. Like, it's a lot better than it used to be. And anything that had it in walls, like, again, if it's there, it has to be disclosed. In Minnesota, nobody expects, so they don't have to disclose. Yee. I don't know, man. I feel like a mesothelioma case is going to bring a quick lawsuit and, if not criminal penalties, astronomical civil penalties. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying that it's way rarer than it used to be, even in the 90s. We have other architectural concerns here in California, like the fact that we don't insulate anything ever, and that we have a lot of buildings that are not yet up to seismic code. All right, so this installation is almost done. Let's talk about Ansible then. So, also, I should mention, sorry, I'm kind of going in a couple different directions. Before we get to Ansible, another thing that I wanted to actually show on stream today was the boring parts. I mean, none of this is particularly thrilling, but the super boring parts of lab management, which is going to look like this. This is how I maintain lab inventories, and I wanted to show you how I do it. You can, your mileage may vary. But basically, I have 3 different sheets or pages in my spreadsheet here. So I've got hosts, so I'm going to have like the IP address, the host name, the network, and the description. So that's like the basic inventory for my hosts. Then for my networks, I'm going to have the network name, the network subnet, and I think, the description. I think that's all I need for that. I don't need gateway and VLAN. For one thing, I'm not using .1q tagging. And for another, the gateway is all one thing in this particular case. And the gateway is going to be described by the network, because the subnet is going to tell me what the gateway is. So for example, if I put my isolation in here, the subnet is 10.1.99.0/24, right? Isolation lab. And in fact, there is no gateway for this because it's not going to the internet. So seclab internal. And that is 192.168.99.0/24. And then I still can't believe you made you learn the IEEE 802.1 standards. I don't know. It's helpful sometimes. Okay, so now that I have this, there's another thing I'm going to do, which is a fun trick I love to do, which is for my network column. I'm going to do data validation and then list from a range. And it's going to be from networks A2 through A. So now, when I have my network, it's a drop-down list for the specific networks. Isn't that cool? Maybe it's not. It's, it's spreadsheets, but whatever. In my previous life, I was a Google Workspace, it used to be called G Suite or whatever, administrator, and I spent the money to get my own Google Workspace domain for my own domain, because it's honestly just like there's nothing holds a candle to it when it comes to real-time collaboration. I hate to say it, but it really is best in class when it comes to this. O365 has other good things about it, but in terms of this particular activity, it's no contest. Even in the spreadsheets category, there's some cool stuff you can do with Google Sheets that you can't do with Excel, including there's a function called query, which actually allows you to literally run SQL queries against your spreadsheet right in line. Really, really powerful. Okay, so what do we have? We have um, 192.168. Oh, and actually, I'm going to give another network, which is home LAN, right? Which is 192.168.1.0/24. Home network. The reason I need that is because the first host I'm going to do is 192.168.1.50, and that's Starbase. That's the actual That's the hypervisor. That's Proxmox. And then 192.168.1.51 is SecLab Jumpbox. Now, this has multiple presences, and you'll see how I handle that in a second. So the first one is, I'm describing hosts by their nick, basically. So in this case, I'm going to make 2 entries for this. But this one exists also 99. Pretty sure it's 100. But it's like DHCP. So I could write DHCP here if I wanted, but the network is on the SecLab internal because it exists there. And it will also exist once we have it set up on isolation. So that's kind of how I manage my data here. So for accounts, sort of the same thing. We would do username, password, description, and then maybe host set, because depending on where this thing is going to live, and maybe I'll make a set for host sets, which will be useful for Ansible. But that's kind of like how I like to keep track of stuff. So for example, SecLab, Ansible management. Infrastructure for now. And I know it's lame, but it's really important to keep track of what you have spun up at any given point for this, because you're going to get confused by something, and you want to have just a record of what's going on. Nice. SecLab 1, 2, 3. That ain't right. Okay. Now, here's the part that's really frustrating. I can't turn this into a template. I can't turn this into a template because oh, I'm an idiot. I could have turned the other one into a template. I could have, before I launched it, I might have been able to, but hardware, we're going to add a network device because we want it to be on the isolation lab as well. Very good. And all right, now that I've done that, I don't have to use this awful console to interact with it, right? Now that it's up and running. And I think we're going to rename this. If I can. Maybe not. Because, well, we'll see if remote desktop is enabled by default for servers. It should be. And I have KRDC. So KRDC is a really nice plasma-based machine. But I don't have any guest agents configured, so I don't know what the IP address is just yet. So I do need to pick that up. Oh, there's the Control-Delete button. I was like, thank you, Guacamole. Yeah, we're going to use RDP once we have it sorted. Now, there's another place we could actually look for the information, which is on our router. So because our router is providing DHCP on the internet connected network, we can actually pull the IP address from there. Oh, I'm in the wrong place. I want to see status DHCP leases. There we go. There's our Windows right there. 192.168.99.113. So in fact, I can do this. Okay. Well, let's see how that does. No? I may have to enable it. Yeah, remote desktop. Let's fix that. Okay, back to KRDC, because it really is a nice client once you get it going. There we go. Lovely. Much more responsive than our Guacamole console. So in order to set this up, you know, obviously we've got a Windows license valid for 180 days. That's nice. So now how do we can set this up to work with Ansible? Remember that our plan is to set up Ansible to work with SSH across the board. So the first thing we need to do is set up Windows to have SSH enabled. And actually not difficult these days. We'll see if it's present. It should be. Do I not have a pass-through? I know I have it here. Maybe I didn't actually copy it correctly. Yeah, there it is. Great. I just didn't copy it correctly. Hooray! So we're checking to see if it's there. So the client is installed, but the server is not present. That's problematic. So we got to install the server. Right. And this is a thing that we would want to do in our auto unattend script, which I am going to get working at some point. Okay, great. And let me see. You can actually set up KRDC to work a little bit like MOBA Xterm or Putty, where you can actually do SSH sessions inside of it as well, which is kind of handy, right? I mean, it's not the best SSH client, but you know, if you wanted to have all of your remote connections in one place, no kidding. XRDC or KRDC, I should say, is how I used to manage a fleet of Macs with Apple Remote Desktop, because I found KRDC to be a lot easier to use than the actual Remote Desktop client. All right, so it's online, and it's at 99.113. Let's prove that we can hit it. Let's see how this looks. SSH administrator at 192.168.99.113. Ooh, wait, is that not right? 99.113. Yeah. And I'm on that network. I am indeed. Obviously, I'm connected to the thing. Do I need... Was there another step? I got to start the service. Can I just paste this onto the command line? Ping is blocked by default. It's idiotic. That works, though. Look at that. It doesn't kick off in my session, but works pretty well. And what do I get on this? Everything. No, who am I / group? There we go. So it actually kicks us into a high integrity session by default, which is fantastic. With this capability, I can now run Ansible commands against this thing. So we have Ansible up and running, and that is right here. Okay, I definitely installed a guest agent. We'll have to figure out how to make that work. But let's go find out where this lives. This should be at, because we're on the isolation network too, but we don't have an IP for it. That's Labubuntu. Ansible doesn't have. What did I set the IP address to? Oh, good. Well, let's find it out and then we'll fix that. I think I did set a static for it. It did. 192.168.99.2. That's why we record these things. So 192.168.99.2. SecLab Ansible. And that's on the internal network. Good. Ansible server. Awesome. And set. Guess we're going to add a host sets page. View freeze, one row, bold it, name, description. Now, if I wanted to, I could make like cool pivot tables where it's like, get me everything that is in the host set. Infrastructure, description, permanent servers. Okay, so the host set, then we will do data validation with that as well. Do data validation, and it'll be host sets A2 to A. So that's infra. The jump box I count as infra. And Ansible is definitely infra. Perfect. And let's see. Now that we have that set, oh yeah. So the next thing that we want to do is we're going to do SSH. We'll do this in a new tab. We're going to SSH seclab at 192.168.99.2. Now we're in the Ansible box. And what we can do is sudo vim etc, good lord, etc Ansible inventory hosts. And so what we'll do here is call it domain controllers. Just make a new host set here. And 192.168.99.113. If we wanted to set it, which we might want to do, set it to, in fact, 99.3. So again, this is something that's like, it's the DC, because it needs to be up for a little bit, is going to be dual homed for Ansible purposes. We can also set it to its internal address. So if we go back over to KRDC, it's actually a better idea now that I think about it. Go to our networking, because we do have two interfaces. So we're gonna... The hell? It's asinine. I mean, I can set it from the command line. I just don't want to. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Okay, properties. So, if I recall correctly, if we look at actually the net plan, yeah, so we're actually intending for this to be 10.1.99.2. We're intending for the domain controller to be kind of the top of the heap in the 10.1.99 environment. So, and the default gateway, which won't do anything, but whatever. Okay. And because this is going to be a domain controller, just to show you how we set this up, we actually use it as a DNS server. Oh, we'll just delete this. Cool. Now, coming back over to Ansible, we're going to set the domain controllers to 10.1.99.2. And then if we do go into our Homelab playbooks, let's vim the domain controller.yaml. And the hosts, we're going to change this to domain controllers. And then let's look at the domain controller role. Tasks main.yaml. This is kind of how it works. So we're going to change the host name to whatever the DC host name is. Now the question, the thing we still have to figure out is, let's actually look at the Homelab playbooks. In a little bit more detail. So the Homelab playbooks that we have, when we look at the domain controller, there's defaults and tasks. So if we look at the defaults, you'll see the Ansible user is administrator, Ansible password, which we have set up. The Ansible connection is WinRM, which we actually want to change because we're going to connect to it over SSH. And in fact, there are some notes about how to do that. Now, it tells you, like, this is how you set up the SSH server. Some of this is actually outdated because it's way easier to do now. But just set Ansible connection to SSH. And then we set the Ansible shell type. So we're going to do that in here. So we're going to vim roles, domain controller, defaults, main.yaml, and we're going to change this up. So the Ansible connection is actually going to be SSH. And then here we have to set Ansible shell. We don't need the WinRM port. Ansible, what was it? Ansible shell, I think. Ansible shell type. To be PowerShell. And this is actually set up correctly. So we're creating a new domain controller. We're going to change the host name to 0 because our new domain is going to be 0day.local. We set it to the quad 8s and 8844. We have the right reverse DNS zone for it. NTP servers look good. The username is, I mean, like that. And I think we're good. So then we run Ansible playbook and we give it domain controller. And in theory, this should work. This will turn this thing into a DC. Or not. Main.yaml. Couldn't resolve module Win PowerShell. This often indicates a missing collection. Ansible Windows Win PowerShell. We will probably need to install that. So content. Yeah. Now, I'm almost certain that we did this. But in case we didn't. Okay, maybe we didn't. Let's run this one more time. Oh, to use the SSH connection type with passwords, you must install the SSH pass program. Sudo apt install y SSH pass. No problem. Now, if we wanted to go one level up for security, we could also do like SSH keys, and you can give Windows SSH keys. All right, one more time. Using an SSH password instead of a key is not possible because host key checking is enabled and SSH pass does not support this. Please add this host's fingerprint to your known hosts file to manage this host. Useless. Okay. At 192.168.99.13. That actually should solve it. Because now it's a known host. Nope. Using SSH pass. What if I do SSH copy ID? Administrator. 192.168.99.13. Let me make sure that I covered everything else up that we need to do. Use plain text password. Add public keys to an authorized key file in the SSH folder of the user's profile directory, and configure the service using sshd-config. Use become on the task with credentials of the user that needs access. Or we kind of already are doing that. But okay, so we just need to copy the key over. No problem. Cat SSH ID say .pub. And we're going to do in over here. Dang it. Are you kidding me? How does this work? Because I know it's in here. Users profile directory. Oh, I have to make it. All right. Okay. And authorized keys, right? That actually shouldn't matter, though, because we're using a password, right? All right, time to Google this error message. Host key checking equals false. Great. In Ansible.config. Oops. Host key checking. Permanently added 10.1.99.2. Because I'm on, yeah, so SSH administrator. Can I get to it? 10.1.99.2. What? Was I not typing something correctly? Three times? No, that can't be right. Yeah, no, the firewall rule is not interface specific. Interesting. I can get to it there, but not on the 99.2. But if I do ipconfig or, yeah, ipconfig, just easy. Oh, snap. It didn't take. Look at that. It doesn't have the right IP address. What? That's wild. Jimmy, thank you so much for the follow. Okay, except that you're a bot, and that's not gonna... It's still setting to the self-assigned IP address. That's bizarre. All right, let's try it. Let's hold on a second. Let's set it to the 192.168 just to see if the Ansible part works. And in fact, let's also snapshot the VM. Okay. That is odd. But did it shut down the machine? No. Weird. Let me see. Let me try one more thing. Let me get rid of the gateway configuration. So I think that might be... Okay. I don't care about that. It's still just doing the self-assigned. That's so crazy. Oh, wait a minute. Go to the hardware. Two network devices. Yeah. And it's not disconnected. So that should definitely be up. Okay, well, again, we've got the snapshot now, so let's try to run Ansible against the... Could not match supplied host pattern. Oh, hold on a second. We'll call it domain controllers, and we'll change it in the inventory. Let's see, Ansible hosts. 92.168.99.113. Okay. Ooh. Ansible facts. Failed modules. Parameter format not correct. Module standard out. Ooh. Let's see. So that might be about the roles, domain controller, defaults, main.yaml. That might be because we're using PowerShell instead of CMD. Well, we're not getting an error straight away. It's different. We got a successful communication, so we're connected over SSH to the server. And so this should turn this thing into a DC if everything else goes according to plan. Set upstream DNS server. Oop. Invalid network adapter name Ethernet 2. Because it's called Ethernet Instance 02. You can call it Ethernet 2. Did you possibly do a duplicate IP somewhere? Yeah, it's possible. But if I did, I'd probably be able to ping it because everything else is Linux, and I don't think so. And I am on here, right? No, I'm not, because I don't have a... The jump box doesn't have an entry on the domain. Yo, this is working, though. Disable the firewall, change the host name, reboot. The rest of the DC commands are working just fine. If we see this come back up and we have a domain controller, I think that might be where we call it for the day. I'm gonna leave the molding with Packer off the stream from now on until I get it sorted, just because it doesn't make for good viewing. And once we have it sorted, then it'll be fun to see it work the right way. But yeah, building out the DC with Ansible, that's going to be a lot of fun. Okay. Oh, good. We did come back. So now, let's see what we have in store for us. The reboot has occurred. And at this point, We're waiting for talkback here. There we go. It's installing Active Directory. And if you look, we'll see probably in the server manager, we'll see the host name has changed. Yep. ZDDC01 for our domain of zeroday.local. Orbital, thank you so much for the gift sub to Theo. Still no luck on the IP address. Killer asks, how do you avoid burnout? I don't, is the real answer. I know personally that my stress comes in waves. And so I'll have like really good moments and then I'll have really, really rough times. And when I sense myself, getting overwhelmed, I'll try to find ways. I'll either, take a day or find other ways to refocus myself. When it gets really bad, I do make sure that I do take time off. But also, and I really can't stress this enough, this is something that I've had to get a lot better at, even in the last year, is learning how to set boundaries for other people. I, by nature, really like to help folks. Whoa, Husky, thank you so much for the 5 subs. Incredible. To Keys, Patat Cat, to Mayor Joe, Barry, and Technique. But yeah, it's learning how to set boundaries is really important. So for example, I tweeted about this yesterday, like someone sent me an invite for like at the end of the business day on a Friday. And the expectation, I think, was that I would just say yes. But no, that is my time. That is not your time. And so I replied saying, I'm afraid that that after the end of my business day, you're welcome to, I'm happy to work with you during the correct hours. And by the way, turned around and I got an invite for a 9 a.m. meeting. So it was like, why not do that in the first place instead of trying to ruin somebody's Friday? But whatever. I think setting boundaries, like understanding this is what is my responsibility, this is not. You have to be diplomatic about it, but understanding like it's actually not a good thing for someone to try to take on more responsibility than they should. Even if you feel like you can help, even if you feel like you will do a good job, it's like it actually is toxic to the organization because you're not allowing them to figure out how to operate without you, basically. You want to make sure that you're not a single point of failure. So make sure that you're not taking on more than you should. Yeah, I know switching jobs to avoid burnout was starting to feel like an abusive relationship. Yeah, I know that feeling. To be honest with you, it's why I left education. No kidding, because technologists, especially in education, and I know the Guar, you're in a situation that's similar. Education doesn't really give technologists their due. It was certainly true in K-12. I was essentially the only person who knew what I was talking about on any given day. I was the only person who knew networking, the only person who knew how to program, any of those things. Oh, hey, the developer, thank you so much for the raid. And so I realized that was no good. It's not helpful to be that in that situation, but it also means that in education in particular, you're undervalued and the work that you do is not understood. And so when people ask you to do things, they don't understand like what will go into the ask. But in terms of other stuff, I really believe that a huge part of what makes my life workable is, especially during the pandemic, is a pretty structured routine. So I get up at the same time every day. I'll I'll take a walk or whatever. I try to work out twice a day, once in the morning and once at lunch, basically. And that allows me to, first of all, get my exercise in before the day takes over, and then it starts the day on the right foot. That helps me out. It puts my brain in the right spot. I know that sounds like one of those influencers on Instagram or whatever, like, this is how you succeed. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just trying to say, like, I'm an early riser, which means that to make something useful of the time, that's what I do. And if I don't have that, if I don't hold myself to a strict schedule, I absolutely fall apart. Like, I am worthless with dead time. I have to keep myself busy, or I'll just like play video games or something. Like, I won't be useful. So keeping myself to a strict schedule, and also keeping work to a strict schedule, meaning, like, unless there's an emergency, like there's a red ball incident response, I am not, as soon as the clock hits, the end of the business day, I am done. I am not going to do work after that time. Because that's not, work isn't a family. Work isn't a vocation. Like, it's not the priesthood or whatever. You didn't join an order, right? There's a transactional relationship, labor for compensation, and set that time aside. That's fine. But once you've hit your time, you're donezo. That's, like, important for you. It really is okay to set those boundaries. Looks like we're rebooting the server again now that we've created the domain. OreoBite says, for the Homelab, do I plan to set up an AV evasion section, or would that take too much time space? So, yeah, but the question is, I do want to set up some of that. The trick is, what commercial tools can I get my paws on? For sure, we're going to be doing OpenEDR evasion, and we're also setting up Sysmon and, a full-out SIM in here. That is absolutely happening. Definitely. All right, cool. We're setting the internal DNS. Snort, maybe. We go through all the cool. Yeah, so, like, the intention really, and it's funny because I know that like Al was having real trouble with the Hollow network. Was that on Thursday, I think? And I've had the same trouble with the Hollow network. Like, it's a really cool network to test in. The problem is that it's not stable. And so I can, with this lab, recreate the same sort of situation, pivot through multiple networks. I can do all that. I can set that up. But it's on my infrastructure. I can give it the resources it needs to be successful. And we can do all sorts of cool stuff to, like, change up the scenario. Sure, like getting MSFV payloads past antivirus. You can do that, build our own custom stuff, for sure. So we got an okay here. Process injection? I mean, yeah, we've done that many times. We will definitely do process injection. But we'll also do proxying and all sorts of cool stuff. Yeah, and let's distinguish between antivirus, as Husky's saying. Let's distinguish between antivirus evasion and, like, endpoint detection, because, like, I'm not worried about Sophos. You know what I mean? I'm worried about Defender. I'm worried about CrowdStrike Falcon. All right, let's see what we have here. Active Directory, users, and computers. Look at that. Well, well, well. Ansible made us a DC. So, like, once you get this thing up and running, it's actually great. Ansible will do what we need to do. In fact, there are even playbooks for creating users using Ansible, and that's exactly what we're going to do eventually. You can see that in computers, we don't have the DC yet, but we can also join stuff to domains using Ansible. Oh, yeah, the Guar. I do. Again, so I spent so much time on Mac that I got used to like Spotlight. So I do that as much as I can. All right, domain admins. It's always weird to me that the local admin becomes a domain admin when you do this that way, but whatever. So yeah, I think that's where we're gonna leave it for today. Lot of hard work, but we got Ansible going. We've got the Windows Server up and running, and we're still fighting with Packer, but I think we're slowly getting the hang of what needs to happen. So yeah, that's going to do it for today, I think. We'll be back on Tuesday doing some Red Team stuff. Don't know for sure, but I think we're going to be going back to binary exploitation. So that is going to do it. Thank you so much, friends. Let's see if there's anybody else that we can give a raid to. Oh, Luca is streaming, as is Live Overflow. Let's do Live Overflow. If they're in fact online. Yeah. So if you don't know about the hack list, there it is. Check us out. We are Legion. We InfoSec streamers. But until next time, friends, please be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and happy hacking. We'll see ya.